Hey everyone. So we're going to start taking a look at the survey data today, which is pretty exciting. It should be pretty fun. I wanted to start just looking at your classwork from yesterday because what we do with the survey data is going to feel really similar to what we did in yesterday's classwork. So it's going to really come down to kind of your individual creativity, with looking at what questions do I want to pair together? What kind of trends do I want to look for in this data? So from yesterday's class, the example I gave everyone was just looking at a question like, how would you describe your dorm experience so far this year? And Google Forms, when we get the results, you could look at the overall distribution of good, excellent, okay, poor. But what we're doing in this class is we're going to be looking for trends. So we're going to be looking for getting data together in two-way tables, like the ones you kind of did yesterday. I've been thinking about like how can we compare the distribution of responses for different groups of students. So for this first one, it was comparing males and females, looking at dorm experience. Were males more likely to have excellent dorm experiences? Or maybe it was females that were more likely to have excellent dorm experiences. And these kind of insights could be interesting to students at Cushing. They could be interesting to faculty. They are relevant to the community. So you're trying to come up with these types of connections, not just looking at one question in isolation, but looking at trends. How did different groups of students answer differently to this question? Here, I'm going to switch over to the survey data. The graphs end up becoming actually pretty easy to make. What is going to bring the presentation to life is your creativity, how you pair questions, what kind of angles you look at the survey data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to help you guys get a sense of how to make two-way tables in Google Sheets. So how can you make two-way tables? And then how do you make graphs that can visualize the trends in those two-way tables? So the questions that I'm going to start with, let's see, I have it here in sheet two. So I'll show you this from scratch and a couple different ways to make graphs. I looked at students from outside the United States versus inside the United States and how many times they go off campus on a weekend. So I thought this might be interesting to look at, but this kind of analysis, it could be interesting to think about. And maybe I'll make graphs and I'll find that it's not that interesting and I'll look for more. This week, we're going to be preparing for a practice presentation. So you're each going to create each individual person is going to create four different two-way tables and graphs that accompany them. That's going to be turned in for classwork, so I'll put that on my Cushing. But your practice presentation, you're only going to be focusing on two of the two-way tables. So everyone's going to make four, but you're only going to be focusing on two because the two most interesting to you. Maybe you'll make some and you'll find that they're not that interesting, and you really want to just highlight the ones that you think will do best in the presentation. Okay, so we'll start with this one. I consider myself, so, international students, US students, how many times a month do you go off campus on a weekend? This is kind of what your survey data is going to look like when you get it. One thing I'm going to do just to clean it up a little bit is I'm going to highlight my first row. So I'm just going to click on the number one here, highlight the first row, and I'm going to do text wrapping. So this symbol here, and then I'm going to wrap the text just so it kind of, I can read the whole question. And you can feel free to like increase the sizes of the different columns just by kind of finding the space in the middle and just stretching them out. So you can kind of work around with the data a little bit there. But what I'm gonna do is take the two questions I'm looking at. So I'm looking at US and outside the US. So I'm gonna copy that and I'm just gonna put that in a new sheet here. I'm gonna do that one in column A. It's not really gonna matter which one's column A or column B. How many times in a month do you go off campus in a weekend? All right. So I'm gonna copy one question into column A, the other question into column B. And what I could do from here is I could go right off the bat to make a two-way table with this. I can just select both columns and I'm going to go to insert pivot table. What it's going to ask if you want to do it in a new sheet or an existing sheet. I always just do it in a new sheet. It's up to you. You can try existing sheet. I just do new sheets. And then it's going to give you kind of this menu here. So what I'm going to recommend doing and what I've been doing in mine is in the rows, I'm going to press add, and I am going to think about what groups do I want to compare here. I want to compare US students to international students. So I'm going to put that question in the rows. It honestly doesn't matter, but if you keep it consistent, it might just be easier. I've found students might struggle in the past sometimes to know what direction they should be calculating the percentages in. So columns, I'm going to have the other question here. It's how many times a month do you go off campus over the weekend? So I have rows, I have my columns. The are the groups I'm going to compare. I'm just going to keep it consistent that way just to make it easier on myself. And then for values, when you press add, you can choose either question. It's going to give you the same data either way. So then what I'm going to do is because I want to compare the US students to the international students, instead of show as default, I'm going to make this percent of row. I'm going to make a percent of row. So it's going to say out of the US students, out of the 100% of US students, 52% said this, 31% said this. But a graph might be a good way to visualize this as well. When I make graphs from two-way tables, so I would recommend that you turn things into percentages first. So when it says show as default, definitely change that to percentage. If the groups you want to compare are in the rows horizontally, then do percent of row. If the groups you want to compare are at the top, then you should do percent of column. For me, I want to compare the US and outside of US, so I'm going to do percent of row. Then what I'm going to do for me when I make graphs from the two-way tables, I like to go from here, so the cell like A2, and then I don't select the entirety of it. I stop here at E4. So I'm just getting like the middle part of the table. I'll select that again from A2 to E4. And then I'll just insert chart. And it'll often give me a nice bar graph here. I think that's a really like when we're making graphs directly from the two-way tables in Google Sheets, the bar graphs. This is one of the main graph types you're going to use. So you can see here it shows the distribution for outside the United States. Looks like that yellow bar is really high. So a high percentage of people were saying 0 to 1 times per weekend. They're going off campus 0 to 1 times per weekend. For the United States students, that yellow bar is much lower. And you can see, for example, the green bar is much, much higher. So it looks like the US students are much more likely to go off campus 4 times or more in a month on the weekends. If I want to add a title to this, I can just kind of double click here. How many times in a month do you go off campus on the weekend? And my graph is separated between US and outside the US. Um, Nice little color coding there, matches the colors, really nice. If I want another graph type I can make with this, so if I click on the three bars here to edit it, I can also make, instead of the side-by-side column chart, which you can also get here, another one I like to make is the stacked bar, the 100% stacked bar graph. So I can find that here, 100% stacked column chart. Sometimes it's suggested as well. So let's do that here, 100% stacked column chart. And this just stacks everything up to 100. So it's really just your preference. If you have a lot of different groups, if there's more than just two groups, this graph might help you kind of look at the trends between lots of different groups. If there's only two, for me personally, I like this one much more for this question. And let me show you another way you could analyze this question. So if I go back here, so bar graphs are a great way to do this. Another way is pie charts. So if I'm going to make a pie chart for the US answers and then another pie chart for the international answers, the way I'm going to approach doing that, the way I'd recommend it, is start by selecting all of your data. And we're just going to sort it so all the US responses are together and all of the international responses are together. It's very important that you select both columns here. So I'm going to select all my data. This is if you want to make pie charts. So what I'm going to do is go to data sort range. I go to advanced just so it knows that the top row is the header. So I check data has header row, and then I'm going to sort it by not by how many times in a month, but by like the US international, A to Z or Z to A. It doesn't matter. It's just if you start with the alphabetically from A to Z or Z to A. So what this does is it filters all of the data so that the top answers are the students from outside the United States and the lower answers are the students from the United States. So if you want to make pie charts from this, what I do is I'm only going to select the column of responses, but I'm just going to select the responses for the outside of the United States people. So this is all of the responses for the outside the United States people. I can do insert charts. It might give me a pie chart, it might not. You can feel free to use a column chart like this or a bar, bar graph like this, but I'm looking for a pie chart here, and I have a nice little pie chart. How many times a month do you go off campus in a weekend? So this is for international students. So I might label it as international. Oops, let's go to chart title. We'll say international. International. Okay. And then I can do the same thing for the US responses. So I can go down to the US. I'm only going to select the responses. I'm not going to select the US column. You just don't need it. Insert charts gives me a bar graph, but I will change that to a pie chart. And I'll change the title here. Yeah, if you double click on the title, it'll like change it right there. US students. Maybe the other one should say international students. And now what I have is these are graphs that I can use to visually highlight the trends that I saw in my two-way table. So my two-way table is here. And you can look at these percentages, and this should be included in your presentation as well. I want to have the two-way tables in there, but of course we want to have some sort of like visualizations as well. For me, the one I personally like for this one, I like this side-by-side bar graph here. So I would just clean up the title and maybe include this one. But if you like the different pie charts, you can include those as well. I think I have those somewhere else. And here what I did is I made sure to match the colors. I noticed that the colors didn't match. So if you do need to change the colors on the pie chart, when you click on it, I just double click on the color slice, and then you can change the color to whatever you want. So if you want this to be, purple instead, you can change it to purple. And then I would just, maybe match that with the other graph. So maybe for 0 to 1, if I want to change that to purple here, I'll just double click, change the color to that purple. So I would just make sure the colors match on the pie chart if you're going to use multiple pie charts. But these are graphs that you can include side by side, and you can talk about the trends that you see. Okay. To show one more example, I looked at the average screen time per day. How much screen time are you doing per day? And then I compare that with males versus females. So this is where the data, yeah, here's the data here. So you can see it's filtered. I had the females at the top and the males at the bottom. There was one student that responded non-binary or other for gender. So because in my analysis, I am comparing males versus females, I did not include that individual in my analysis. So I looked at all of the females. So if I want to do pie charts, I would select all my female responses, insert charts. And it gave me a nice little pie chart. But if it didn't, I could choose the 3 dots, edit charts, and change it to a pie chart. And I could also create a pie chart for the male students. So this is for female. And then for males, right, I'm just gonna right there for males, insert charts. Okay. And change the title there. Okay. So I have nice little pie charts kind of comparing the screen usage of male versus female students. And if I look back to the pivot table, so what I did here is I have male and female in the rows. So I did percent of row. So what I'm saying is that for the females, about 10% said this response, about 47% said this response, 30%, 14%, and so on. And then I also have the distribution of responses for males. So I am comparing the distribution of female responses to the distribution of male responses. This graph compares the two. And when I made the graph, I just selected this data here in the middle from A to, in this case, from A2 to E4. I'm just selecting the meat of the table, the inside of the table, and not the grand totals on the outside. And I'll show you again, insert charts. And there you go. So of course I would change the title here, but I think this is a really clean way to compare male and female responses. If I did want to have the stacked, the stacked bar graph, I could do that again right here, going to 100% stacked. And just as a reminder for getting the data from the columns of information to the two-way table, I just want to show you that one more time, just so you have another look at it. So I have gender in column A. I have screen usage in column B. I'm just going to select all of my data here. I'm just including males and females because that's what I'm comparing. Insert pivot table. I like to do it in a new sheet. It gives you some like AI suggestions here. I haven't used those much. I'm going to go right to the rows and I'm going to compare the different genders. So I'm going to put my gender in the rows. In columns, it's only going to give me one option, the other question. And then in values, you can select either one. Like I said, it should give you the same information. And then what I'm going to do is percent of row, because that will let me compare the responses of males and females. So this is where we're starting with our analysis here. So what each person is going to do, we have Friday is going to be the first practice presentation. The practice presentation is going to center around 2 different two-way tables, and then graphs supporting the trends in those two-way tables. So for me, maybe these two-way tables are the ones that I want to include. But over the course of the next two classes, I'm going to also make two more two-way tables. So each individual is going to make four, and you're going to pick your best two that you're going to include in the practice presentation on Friday. There'll be more information to come on that. Let me know if you all have questions. Hopefully this video helps you understand kind of how to create two-way tables in Google Sheets, and then different types of graphs that you can make to visualize the trends in two-way tables. Okay, have fun.